Nebraska Preps postgame with Damon Benning and Jacob Padilla.
That's the big voice guy letting you know that it is another week of Nebraska Preps postgame with my main man, Jacob Padilla. And I am old DB. Huge. Well, I don't believe in that. But a good weekend of high school hoops coming up. But first, we have to rewind to the week that was. That's kind of what we do. JP, how are you, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing well. Just back from Columbus. It was a long day on Sunday driving back, but really enjoyed heading up there and covering the tournament.
Hey, real quick, since you were busy with volleyball, how was that environment when you pitted against some other big events that you've seen? That's 18K.
Yeah, that was my fourth Final Four for volleyball alone. So I've been fortunate enough to be at a couple of record crowds, obviously in Omaha, and this year the largest volleyball crowd ever for strictly just a volleyball match. So it was pretty phenomenal. But I mean, you got the two fan bases that lead the country in attendance. So you pit those against each other, it's going to be a good turnout. And Wisconsin, they had plenty of support there. Obviously, you know, Nebraska is going to as well. So 5-set match. I don't think you could ask for anything more.
Yeah, you're used to being in gyms, so you know height. You ever seen a volleyball team go 6'7", 6'8", 6'9"?
Yeah, that's pretty phenomenal. And the fact that they find women that size that can move and play as well as they do, because that's not easy. Like Dana Rettke she's the first and probably I believe she'll be the only ever 5-time AVCA first team All-American. So that tells you right there just how special she is and has been her whole career. And then you got a freshman that comes in and steals the show and wins MOP of the Final Four.
Yeah, and you pit it with maybe having the best setter in the country, right?
And,
I mean, that's a heck of a combination for Wisconsin.
And then Lauren Barnes, a libero, had probably maybe one of the best matches of her career as well.
Defensively, she was fantastic.
So Nebraska gave them everything they had. I think they're probably going to be thinking about that second set for a long time. Four chances to win it. Couldn't finish any of them. And then you end up losing 5. But that was, again, heck of a match. And the fact, Wisconsin had 5 super seniors on the team. Nebraska had 1 that was actually playing. So plus 3 freshmen starting. So that kind of quite a bit of a difference in experience in that match. But I think Nebraska fans have a lot to be excited about moving forward.
Let me ask you real quick. And I was talking to your cohort, Brandon Vogel, this morning. Are you surprised that defense in 2021 in volleyball reigns supreme with all the emphasis on hitting and being so offensive minded?
Because I cover John Cook, no, because serve, pass, and defense is basically you're going to hear that at least once every press conference. That's what he built his program on, and that's how they've been so successful. And Nebraska. That's how Nebraska got to where it was, because they were not. They were a decent attacking team this year. They were not a great attacking team by any means,
and they brought Wisconsin's numbers down significantly, and so Wisconsin had to figure out how to get some stops, and they did it as well.
Yeah. So highest level of volleyball, phenomenal match. It's everything you could have asked for.
All right, let's move on to the high school level. We'll even change genders for a little while, if we will. The week that was, starting in Class A with a handful of teams traveling to the Tyson Event Center and kind of a little round-robin tournament deal up in Sioux City.
Yeah, you made the trip up there for Westside in that deal. It's 3-0 week for the Warriors. But again, 75-59 over Lincoln Southeast, 82-41 over Omaha Benson, and then the 56-46 win up against Western Christian.
Yeah,
and no odd body in that one.
Yeah, so we hope Tate's everything's good, right? Wasn't feeling well, thought it was best to kind of stay back behind, but it was a busy week for Westside. We talked about the Lincoln area schools, and we're going to get to this in a second when we go Southwest Prep, Southwest versus Lincoln Southeast and North Star. Of the teams in Lincoln, I think if I'm going to buy stock in the long term, I'm not so sure it's not Lincoln Southeast. That's a young basketball team. but they show flashes. Now, it was a very tough week schedule-wise for them with Omaha West Side and Lincoln Southwest going back to back. But that's a team where they're going to have a lot of good days ahead.
Well, they're playing so many freshmen and sophomores.
Yeah, B.J. Bradford.
And I was talking Joey Warning during fall league or whatever, and kind of, and during summer league too, is just kind of coming down to, all right, what are the kind of football players, Jake Applegate and Gunnar Catula, who had previously played basketball, and Jake's a really good basketball player. They decided to focus on football and not play this year. So decide, all right, time to turn the reins over to these young guys and let's see what they can do. And that's going to come with some lumps, especially a lot of them are, you got a lot of smaller guys in there. And I figured, I think Tate Oddbody had 23 in that one. I was talking with Joey before the match. I kind of had a feeling that he would give them some fits just because they don't really have a lot of wings. They got bigs and small guards.
He's off to a fantastic start. That's the Tate Oddbody that I've come to know and love. He has been very efficient around the rim. He's finding a way to become comfortable in that offense where, listen, I don't think it's no mystery kind of how I feel. There are times that Westside dribbles the basketball too much. Yeah. And for Tate kind of getting acclimated a year ago, I think there were some growing pains. He was never really fully healthy. But I think with the start of this year, this is the Tate Oddbody that I think the Metro was accustomed to seeing when he came over from Elkhorn South.
Yeah, and then with Tate not playing on Saturday, you had Charlie Davis, who we've talked about before, but senior reserve guard in there, stepping up, 11 points, 3 of 7 from 3. That's the benefit of depth, and that's kind of what you need. Yeah. You've got seniors that maybe aren't featured players that have had good summers, that have been able to play feature roles in other environments, but they come and playing behind kind of the stacked backcourt at Westside. When you get the opportunity, you got to be able to step up, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, it's funny you bring him up. I was joking with Caleb earlier. He's having these high assist games in just limited minutes, although he was stretched in Sioux City. He's pretty close to coming back to full go in terms of his minutes, and I think he had a quick 6 or 7 assists. And he said, "Dad, listen, it's easy when you get the ball to Charlie Davis and he's open. He's going to make shots. I like getting him the ball." And that's really what Charlie's capable of doing. If he can keep this up, because he got off to the good start last year, and then the minutes started to kind of subside. We'll see how it works with the minutes. But when he's on the court making threes, he changes the way Westside can play dramatically with Payson opposite him because those guards will get in the paint. They're very good with dribble penetration, and the key is, what do you do with it once you get in the
right
paint?
Decision? Yeah,
if you make good basketball decisions, there's going to be a lot of open shots in that offense because they've got 4 guards, depending on how you treat Chandler Meeks, between Reggie Thomas, Chandler, Caleb and CJ. They're going to get in the paint at some time in that offense. So it was a good week for them, but still continuing to kind of grow. Arguably wasn't really the best performance, though. The best performance was had by the number 1 team in the state in Bellevue West, who, of all those top 3 teams, Bellevue West, Millard North, and Westside, their opponents' win percentage is the greatest. And so it leads you to believe that they played the toughest schedule, and they've looked every bit of the number 1 part.
Yeah, and that being said, it was a tough week for them. Elkhorn South, who has been really scrappy,
really got to figure them out. Man. They have got they've piqued my interest.
Yeah, I think they cracked the back end of the coaches poll at nebpreps.com. They're at number 9. Despite just being 3-3 because of the showing they've had against good teams. And Bellevue West, they were down 18-9 after the first quarter and down 31-22 at halftime. And then they kind of settled in and ended up winning in the second half. But that was only a 56-53 win. And they had kind of their big 3. Jaden Jackson, who has been struggling so far this year, had 15. William Kyle had 14. And then Josiah Dother had 13. The rest of the team had 14 points on 5 of 24 shooting.
Yeah.
And that's the strength of this team that we thought were, again, the depth, the number of different contributors playing around a guy like Dotzler, who's capable of getting in the paint and making plays for himself or others. and they just could not hit shots in that game.
It's interesting you bring up Jaden Jackson. He's part of that group that I know really, really well that played on the 15s, who's played with, a lot of these guys. The Neil Mossers, who's coming off a great shooting, coming off a great shooting performance. The Jaden Jacksons, the next evolution for their game is you have to be able to be multifaceted. It can't just be spot up threes when you're open, because what happens is when people get scouting reports and they start to smother you and make you put it on the deck, that's going to be the next evolution. And we'll get to it, right, with Millard North and Omaha South. I just couldn't believe the space or the lack of being able to figure out where Neil Mosser was on the court. You've got to touch him and crowd him and make him put it on the deck. If you give him a good look at an open three, it's as good as knocked down. It's virtually a layup for him. But sticking with Bellevue West there, as we're going to get into something else.
And then a shout out to Henry Burt, who had a really good week for Elkhorn South. He had 22 in that game. He had 14 on 6 of 8 shooting in their win over Bellevue East. So 36 points on 21 shots. That's pretty efficient. Senior there for that hasn't played a lot previously, but is coming off the bench and giving them a nice scoring spark. But on Saturday, Bellevue West made the trip up to the Sanford Pentagon in Sioux Falls to take part in the kind of Hoop Hall Classic deal up there. And they drew a really tough opponent in Corona Centennial from California, who Max Preps has number 6 in the country. And boy, did they get shell-shocked right out the gates. 25-10 down in the first quarter.
Yeah.
Turnover. I think they might have had more turnovers than they did shot attempts. Threes weren't falling. At that point, you got a somewhat young team. You've obviously got a few key guys that have played a lot of varsity basketball, but outside of them, a lot of guys that haven't played high level, that haven't played against a team like this. And it really showed that their press just picked them apart. Guys just not on the same page, not doing what they need to kind of break the press. And that led to a lot of runouts and layups the other way. But credit to them. They cut it all the way down to 2 points. They got it down to 31-29 during the second quarter, and they were only down 6 at halftime. And they did a great job of kind of settling in, handling the pressure. They finally started knocking down some shots, which was huge. I thought throughout Josiah Dotzler, he looked, he had some of his struggles. Only got 1 3 to fall, had some turnovers, but I didn't think all those were his fault. I thought he was doing a great job of getting into the paint and kicking it out, which is kind of what you need to see from him in terms of projecting the next level, because he's not going to be a 20-point a game scorer in college, especially early on. You got to be able to show that you are a point guard, that you can make plays for others. And he was doing that. Guys just weren't hitting shots. And this was against a high-level athletic team with a lot of length. So I thought he did a good job of kind of dealing with a tough situation early on. And in the second half, it finally started to pay off. Guys, the shots started to go down. And unfortunately, the third quarter happened, and they ended up losing that one 25-8. The turnovers got back, shots stopped falling.
The inability to take care of the basketball.
Yeah, just snowballed on them. So that ended up being an 81-62 loss. But they showed some things in that, but they also showed that there's some guys that are playing key roles that have a long way to go, I think, before we get to the postseason. Obviously, they're not going to play anybody like Centennial in Nebraska. So it's still feel good about them at number 1 right now with what they've shown. But
yeah, no rest for the weary too, because they're on the road today.
Yeah, going down to Kansas City for a deal down there. But the guy that impressed me most in that game was freshman Robbie Garcia. He almost had a double-double. 10 points, 9 rebounds off the bench, knocked down a pick and pop 3 that would look really good. Crashed the offensive glass hard. He's a guy that I knew about him, but I didn't realize he was going to play as much as he has and be as big of a part of what they're doing so far. And he's handled it pretty well.
It's interesting too, because he's kind of I wouldn't say forgotten. I mean, those in around that high school, have talked about him for a little bit of time now, but I think he's been better than advertised. It's not typically what happens over there, playing a lot of young guys, especially at that spot early. But hey, listen, when you're playing well and you've been efficient, that kind of stuff will happen.
Yeah. And they ran into a buzzsaw at Centennial led by 5-star junior guard Jared McCain, who ended up with 32.
He was every bit as good as advertised.
He knocked down 5-6 threes, just all over the place, going to the bucket, some pull-up jumpers. He was just tough to deal with. And I mean, when that happens, like there's not a whole lot you can do about it. They had the best player on the court, and that ended up being the difference. But if you want to move on, we got you mentioned Millard North in that Omaha South game, and 68-53 win on Friday. And Neil Mosser is a guy that he's kind of the head of that highly touted freshman class, really talented, a lot of kids in terms of he's the one that played the most last year, and you kind of felt good about him sliding in the starting lineup this year. Looked like he was ready. He was been one of the guys that hasn't really been clicking yet, and boy did he this week. You mentioned 24 points, 8 of 12 from 3, 8 of 12 from the field, 7 of 11 from the 3-point line.
Yeah.
And then he had 6 assists on top of that, 4 boards. Yeah, so that is doing more than just shooting. But
I like the fact you brought up the assist because I think he's a skilled passer.
Right? I honestly think that might be his best skill. Like as good of a shooter as he is, the passes he makes.
It's interesting because I think people let their feelings get in the way with trying to assess his game, right? He plays with a little swag. He's got a little bravado. He may wave at the crowd, blow a few kisses. That's just for me. That's a no big deal, right? Yeah. So when you're assessing his game, I think you have to treat him fairly, though, right? You just don't let your personal feelings get in the way of how he plays. He's a very good passer. He's got a high basketball IQ. And I agree with you, though the struggle's early because the scouting report is you got to fit in his jersey. You got to touch, clutch, grab. He really struggled a little bit in the back half of the summer season with getting good open looks. And so I think that's kind of the next evolution for him. But I think you're spot on in terms of his ability to deliver the basketball in the tight windows. He understands spatial awareness, how to move. I like his game, man. And you know what? He's not shy on confidence and he's going to let it fly. He could be close to being due, but I'm telling you, you give him an inch and it's as good as knockdown. You have got to stay close to him.
Yeah. And Millard North defensively, again, Jason Green's been the best shot blocker in the state so far. I think
he's got really good anticipation.
Another 5 blocks in that game. They Omaha South had 21 turnovers, shot 38% from the field. So that's how you win a game right there. And then Millard North followed it up with the 73-66 win against Lincoln East on Saturday. They were out 27-10 after the first quarter. And East, credit to them, they did a great job of battling back into it. But again, Monster 13 points, 3 of 7 from 3. So that's 10 of 18 from 3 in 2 games. That's kind of more in line what you think.
Maybe he'll start to get it going and they'll play tomorrow and they'll get the winner of a play-in game. So, we'll see. But
how about this for David Harmon? 2 double-doubles, 31 points, 20 rebounds, and 10 assists in 2 games this week for Millard North.
So I've watched him a long time now. You know what I think his best asset is? It's hard to pick up if you're doing scout. He's as good off the second time off the floor as he is the first. He's a very quick leaper. So, he's kind of got that little pogo stick to him a little bit. Yeah. Reminds me a little of Malik Ucheweki, who is very good off the second bounce and very good with timing. He's crafty around the 10.
A lot of those boards were on the second or on the offensive end as well.
That's what he does.
Right in with that. And the way he uses athleticism and the second bounce, the attack in the basket in transition,
long arms,
especially. He's done a great job of kind of growing as a player. And Jason Green kind of continuing to do what he does. Another 4 blocks in that game, 18, 9, and 4 in that one. But man, obviously I'm biased, but we got to talk about him again. Carter Templemeyer kept East in that game.
No, you're allowed. He's 30, he's pretty good.
30 points on 11 of 20 shooting, including 5 of 8 from 3 and 3 of 4 from the line. That against a team, again, that just 38% shooting, 21 turnovers against Omaha South previously, undefeated at this point, reigning state champs. And
I think we should probably stay with South here for just a sec because, I'm not all out, not all in either, right? But this was one of those teams where people talked about in the offseason, hey, Coach Chubbuck made the decision to go young last year. Will it pay dividends? It's going to be this reoccurring theme. Can they take good care of the basketball, not turn it over, and will they defend on the defensive end? just pay attention to those two stats, and that will pretty much let you tell the tale of what's going to happen with this Packer team.
For sure. I mean, that's the key of every successful Chubbuck team is relentless pressure in the backcourt, just really taking at you defensively, making nothing easy. And I think DeAndre Perkins is still kind of settling, and he finally had a kind of a big game in their last one, 18-9, I think it was. But he struggled early on. Obviously, JoJo Ford isn't playing yet, not till second semester. So those are just based on what we saw in the summer. We thought those are two guys that were going to make a big impact on this team to go with guys like Ricky Lofton and Jacob Martin, Isaiah Jackson, some of these sophomores and juniors. Yeah. And you're not quite getting what you thought out of them just yet. We'll see kind of once we get into January and February what they look like. I think they'll probably be a better team in the second half than the first half, but they do have a lot of things to figure out.
And then one of the big ones, you skip over to, we talked a little bit about Westside. You get right to Creighton Prep with arguably
the most bizarre week,
but probably the most impressive win of the aforementioned.
Well, and especially considering when you think about what just happened on Thursday. So obviously good start to the season, 4-0. They go to Gretna on Thursday and lose 72-49.
Yeah, head scratcher.
And shot 38% from the field, only took 6 free throws. You had 11 from Jungers, 12 from Evans. That was it. And then Rishel, who has kind of been that third scorer, shot 1 of 9 from the field. They got Casey O'Malley back, but obviously he's not kind of full strength yet this week, I don't think. But you go from that. I think what Alex Wilcoxon, maybe it might have had 6 threes in that game or something like that.
He shot lights out.
But yeah, you go from 72-49 loss to just absolutely destroying a really good Southwest team, 62-32 in Christmas at the Cage.
Yeah. You know, and that was a highly anticipated matchup for Coach Baugh's bunch. You know, I saw that whole team. They were at the Southeast Westside game, and those guys were dialed in. You know, they were scouting Southeast. And there was some talk about the level of importance in terms of traveling to Omaha and playing in what's arguably the toughest environment to play in, right? I mean, the Birdcage is renowned, and it reared its ugly head,
especially during Christmas in the Cage. Like that's, if you haven't been to that, just as a fan of high school basketball, I'm kind of disappointed. I've only been able to go to a couple over the years because I've always got something going on that day. But they do a great job of really kind of making. Obviously, they're always fired up, but that day in particular, they really bring it.
Yeah, Westside's been a victim. I saw that firsthand. Westside has been a victim there in that type of environment. Man, they get after it.
Holding a team to 32 points, a really good team, 24% from the field. And only 9 free throw attempts. And you look, Rylan Smith, 3 points. Chuck Love did not score.
And coming off a 5-point performance against Southeast.
Ben Hunziger, 6 points. Lucas Helms, 3 points. Those are probably your 4 most talented scorers. Grant Milak had 11, I think, in that game to lead them. He's a good athlete, can shoot the ball, but outside of him, like those are probably your 4 best shot creators, and got very little out of that group. So that's, when that's the case, you're going to struggle. But yeah, to bounce back from whatever happened on Thursday to that on Saturday, Creighton Prep, I think it's still going to take a while for us to figure out exactly what they really are. But that was enough to impress the coaches to keep them at number 4 in the rankings despite the loss.
We touched on Southwest a couple of different times. Let's jump down to Central,
yeah.
It's an interesting team, right? I'm not quite sure what to think about them. They had the grudger we talked about against Omaha North, still sitting at 6-1. I just keep kind of plodding along.
Yeah, that first loss was to Papio South, and they've had some real like thrillers because last year they had a couple really good ones, especially head to the postseason there.
Well, last year I think they played each other 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, exactly. And
it just seemed like they were always getting matched up with one another.
And get another 64-62 win for a young Papio South team. And so Central, I think, is going to go as Jay Dawson does. And he's had some big games this year, but he had 8 points on 3 of 14 shooting, and the 3 ball just wasn't falling for them. 0 for 7 from 3. So I think that right there, I don't think you're going to get enough scoring on that team if Jay isn't close to kind of top of his game.
We talked about the North game last week, kind of, didn't shoot it particularly well. Ended up being their leading scorer, but the more efficient he is, the better it is, I think, for that basketball team. But there's a lot of pressure on him. He's got to get some help from PJ Davis and some of those guys really to help kind of offset that scoring.
Yeah, I think PJ had 15. DeAndre Brody I think was double figures, but outside of that, there wasn't a whole lot of offense. So you're going to need consistent 18 to 25 from Jay to beat good teams for sure. You'll be able to scrape by some of the lesser teams.
So stop me if you've heard this before, but they open up with at Metro, right?
Who's that?
That would be Papio South.
I hadn't even looked so fully at the bracket.
It's crazy how it works, but they'll get them again for the second time, and it's in 5 days.
And Daniel Brocale had 22 in that game. Bryson Ball, freshman for Papio South, had 16, 6 to 10 shooting. He's had games of 21, 19, 16, and 12 out of his first 6 varsity games. So that's pretty impressive start to your career. And they've got
not bad, huh?
Got Reese Kirch, another freshman, playing to go with a guy like Brocale and Ian Medic, who's kind of Energizer Bunny there.
I like Medic.
Yeah. So they've got a mix of kind of veterans and young guys in there. So Papio South is kind of going to be an interesting team to follow.
Let's jump over to East real quick, as we're going to be up against the clock. We'll barely get through Class A this week, but shoot, man, let's get to East. Yeah. Or actually Pius, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, East, 72-57 win against Grand Island. Carter Templemeyer, 24 on 8 of 14 shooting, 4-7 from 3, 4 of 5 from the line. So pretty good week for that kid.
Hey, I like how listen. You don't have to apologize. He's a good basketball player, and I think he kind of flies under the radar. He's worked his tail off. He's become pretty complete.
No doubt about that. Pius, 58-43 win against North Star, and then on Saturday, 53-33. Win against Gretna on Saturday.
Yeah. So when that one came out on the schedule, I'm just like, what's going to win? I thought 40 would win that game.
Yeah.
Turns out 34 would have won it.
Yeah. That was, again, wild swings. Gretna goes from 79 in a win against Prep to 33 in a 20-point loss against Pius.
They've kind of had they've had some quarters in the last couple of years where I'm like, what? And they did it again against Pius, where they scored 1 point in the third quarter.
That's really hard to do.
I mean, they're outscored 17-1. The third quarter, that was obviously the difference in that one.
Yeah. But good week for Sam Hostreiter, 35 points on 15 of 20 shooting in the 2 games. And he's really gotten out to a nice start this season.
He's a good player.
Sure.
He's a tough matchup.
Yeah.
I think a little bigger, a little longer when you stand next to him than I think people think.
He's got good body control, footwork, head fakes, all kinds of moves in the paint. But they're still, I think, searching for a little bit of consistency outside of him,
especially at the point guard spot.
Yeah. So, or obviously Jackson Kessler is still kind of adjusting to the varsity level. And then Brady Christensen and Jack Hostreiter both have kind of been up and down. Brady's rebounding the ball really well, but scoring wise, Jack and Brady, I think they need a little bit more consistency out of them if they want to be a top 5 team. And they fell to 7, I believe, in the poll this week at 4-2.
Let's go to Elkhorn South.
Yeah. 3-3, but they've had they had the close,
very unforgiving schedule early on.
They almost beat Central, let that one slip away. They almost beat Bellevue West, let that one slip away. And then they go and handle business 69-42 against Bellevue East. Again, I mentioned Henry Burt had a really great week. And that's just a team with a lot of guys that can play. 1 through 10, you've got guys that can contribute in one way or another.
The undefeated, surprised to see them at 10.
Yeah.
This is a little bit better team than I think the experts think, the Lincoln Northeast Rockets.
Well, and then I saw on Saturday they were down 25-13 after 1 against Omaha Bryan. Yeah. And I was like, and then they go and dominate second half 42-24 to get the 65-59 win. So they're kind of plugging along at 6-0. Again, Papio is probably their best win at this point. I don't know that they played anybody better than them.
I agree.
So we'll see the HAC tournament. They'll get a chance to really kind of show where they belong in that Lincoln hierarchy here coming up after the holiday break.
Let's highlight some of the big matchups this week in B. We wondered if Beatrice was for real. They answered that question with the win over Platteview.
Watching the second half of that game, 59-44 win, and Platteview tried to make pushes, but every single time Elliot Jurgens was there to make a play. He finished with 20 Tucker Timmerman added 15.
Juergens' ability to handle tempo is going to be a key for them. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and I think he was rebounding really well. He's making plays for others, setting it up. He had a really good game in that one. Milliken had 27. Draper had 11. The rest of the team had 6 points.
Yeah, it's going to be this reoccurring theme, right? Draper and Milliken will get theirs. It's who's next. That's why I put kind of the onus on a guy like Weeblehouse, who's the X factor for them, especially offensively, to give them a different kind of dimension.
And Platteview bounced back and beat Boys Town and Gross to kind of win that little holiday tournament deal. I think that Weeblehouse had 19, led him in scoring in one of those games. But so yeah, it's just gonna, like you said, that, and then defensively, like they gave up 59 to Beatrice, which just isn't the way that they're going to be able to win. They just could not stop. Again, the Juergens dribble penetration and either score or dump off.
He handles pace really well.
Yeah.
The big matchup this week, right?
With 1 versus 2.
Beatrice and Scott.
The only 2 undefeated teams left in Class B are already facing off in the third week of the season here coming up. Or whatever week it is. And yeah, that's on Tuesday night, Beatrice at Scott.
There's a couple key matchups you liked in C1 too. We'd be remiss because I know a couple of those teams in particular, we liked Wahoo a ton. They're capable of playing deep too. Now, historically, he hasn't played a ton of guys, but it's going to be a good week for those top 4 in C1.
Well, yeah, and again, we mentioned 1 versus 2 in B according to Sauter's coaches poll. It's 1 versus 2 in C1 as well, with Wahoo going to Ashland Greenwood. At this point, I have no idea where I'm going on Tuesday night. That's going to be a tough call.
It's I've got the easy home side. I've got to be at West Side for Benson, even though they just played Benson. But it's not like I'm going to tell my kiddo, hey, I'm going to go watch, Platteview and Boys Town. Actually, they just played. But, I wouldn't do that. Yeah. But, man, there are some good matchups.
Yeah, and Ashland Greenwood's 4-0 start here. They just destroyed Milford 65-39 on Saturday. I thought that one was going to be a little bit good.
Yeah.
With what Milford brought back from last year's team. But they took care of business, so they're looking like the real deal. And we'll get a chance to see on Tuesday how real they are, because we know how deep and talented Wahoo is.
Yeah, I'll be curious to get I obviously want to watch online tonight and see what happens with Bellevue West, because I think that'll be a quality opponent. But we'll learn a lot throughout the Metro Holiday tournaments and the HAC tournaments as well, where the schedule will be elevated a little, and you'll see a lot of more like on like.
Yeah. And I think next week we'll get into a bit more previewing of that, because obviously we got the break coming up here.
Yeah, we call that the dead period, right?
Got
can't do anything from Wednesday to Sunday.
Bunch of games on Tuesday, and then again the break. So won't have a lot to look back on besides the couple of the big matchups we talked about, but we can kind of get into the Metro quarterfinals and those matchups a little bit.
I got to ask the two people smarter than me, you or Cam. We're back Monday, right? We're on the 27th regular time, right?
Yep, I believe so.
It's good that the guy that should know the schedule doesn't know the schedule. But guess what? I know people that are smarter than me. That's Jacob Padilla. I'm ODB. Make sure that you tune in next week. We'll try to slow it down, maybe give it a little more time, and give everybody the due that they deserve, man. But Nebraska Preps post game, doing the best we can. Again, that's Jacob Padilla. I'm ODB. Join us next week.
A Hurrdat Media Production.